and welcome back to my channel. In case you're new here, my name is Buki Sheila. I'm a fashion designer and a pattern dressmaker from Nigeria. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you so much for sticking with me. And in today's video, I'll be showing you how I make this beautiful silk drape dress with a bralette. So if this is something you're interested in, make sure to stick to the very end of this video. And don't forget to give the video a thumbs up, click on the subscribe button if you haven't done that yet. And you can always let me know your thoughts and suggestions on the comment section. So without further ado, let's dive into the video. Hi. So to make this beautiful dress, you would need a basic bodice pattern, and if you don't know how to make one, I have got you covered. Okay, so on this video there will be a link and on the description box, so you can watch my video on how to make your own basic bodice pattern from scratch. And I'll advise you to keep it as a block so you can always trace out from it to make whatever you want to make. If you've been following me on this channel, you should be familiar with this particular pattern. I have used it a couple of times and I'll keep using it. So all I'm going to do is to trace out and derive to my style on my new pattern. So this is my trace out pattern, and as you can see, the waist shaping is bigger than the shaping on the initial pattern block. This is because I took out the waist dart from the side, because on this dress we don't need a dart. Okay, so I took out the dart and I also traced out another pattern pieces from the chest line to the waistline. That is what I'll be using to make the bra part of the dress. So you'll see that as we move forward on the video. Okay, so now I'm going to extend the length of my pattern. So feel free to work with whatever length you want to work with. For me, I added 20 inches from the hip line. I added 20 inches downward, and I added 1.5 inches on the side seam to give it that A-line shape. Okay, I hope that makes sense. Now I'll be connecting the 1.5 inches I took to the hip line to give it that A-line shape like I mentioned earlier, and I'll repeat the same thing on the front pattern. Once this is done, the next thing I'll be doing is to add a bit of ease to the waist shaping. Okay, so I would not be adding any zipper closure to the dress. So in order for me to fit it on okay, like perfectly, I'll be adding ease, and I'll make sure I blend the curve, because our body is not that curvy. So I'll make sure I use my French curve to blend any sharp edges on the pattern. So the part I'll be needing to make the dress is from the bust line downward for both the front and back. I'll be cutting off the upper part as I don't need it, but before I do so, let's work on the bralette part of the dress. So like I mentioned earlier, I traced out a separate piece of pattern for the bralette, and as you can see, this has the dart. I'll be making use of the waist dart on the front, and I'll be shaping this pattern with you. Okay, now to shape the pattern, I'll measure what I have on the bust line on both the front and back, and I'll take the excess out from the true bust line. So for the purpose of this video, I am using inches. I would normally use centimeters because that is what I was taught with, and that's what I use. So I have 18.25 on the bust line, and the half of my bust is 17 inches. So that gives me 1.25 inches excess. So I'll divide that into 2 and take it out from the side seam just like this. Next, I'll check what I have on the under bust. The UB means under bust, so I'll check what I have and also take the excess out from the side and on the dart. So I'll exclude the dart when measuring, and I have 18 inches on the underbust, and the half of my underbust is 15. So like I said, I don't want the dress to be too tight because I want to be able to fit it on without a zipper closure. So I took out 1 inch each from both the side seam, and I divided the other 1 inch in between the underbust that. And lastly, I'm checking what I have on the waistline, and I'll take out the excess on the side seam and on the dart. So on the waist I have 17.4, and half of my waist is 15, so that leaves me with 2.4 inches ease. So I'll take 1 inch each from both the side seam and the remaining 0.4 from both sides of the darts. And now I'll use my French curve to shape in the side. So as you can see, I did not shape it to the waistline, but I later came back to do that part. And I'll use my straight ruler for the underbust, darts, and also tighten the chest area. So you know, a bralette, when making a bralette, is more like you're making a bustier top. Okay, so I'll tighten the chest part by taking half an inch from both sides of the darts, and I'll reconnect using my ruler. Once I'm done with that, I will then connect the shoulder dart to the underbust dart, just like this. Now I'll be marking 0.5 inch from the center front line on the underbust. This is to get 1 inch space in between my cup. This is just like making a corset. You want a space in between your cups. So of course we know this is half of the pattern. By the time I cut on fabric on fold, when I open up, I'll be having 1 inch space in between my bralette. I hope that makes sense. So now I'm just connecting my darts to the waistline, and I also do the same on the side seam. And the next thing I'll be doing is to cut open my dart from the waistline to the nipple point. So the reason I'm doing this is because I don't want my dart seam, like the bustier seam, to get to my chest point on my bralette. I want my dart to start from the underbust and end on the nipple point. So I cut that open to enable me close the shoulder dart. So once that is done, I would then take the shape of, like, draw the shape of my bralette from the 0.5 I took in upwards to the chest line. So now I'm just cutting the pattern from the center front, and I'll tape it down so I can access the pattern, like take the shaping of my bralette. Before I draw the shape of the bralette, I will be measuring 1 inch downward from the underbust, and this is what I'll be using to cut my band. Okay, the band of the bralette. So I'm just drawing a straight line across, and for the back, that is all I need. I'll be cutting that on fold, and I'll use ×2 of the measurement because I'll be adding elastic band to the back in order to fit the the bralette on without any closure point. I hope that makes sense. So now, in order to draw my lines, I am just going to open the dots. I just open the dots and I'll draw my line and then close the dots. Now I'll be connecting the 0.5 I took in from the underbust to the chest line and also connect the other part. So on this part you can decide to do you. If you want your dart seam to get to the chest point, you don't need to then close the dart. All you need to do is to cut out the dart. So you have two different pieces. So your seam will get from the underbust up to your chest point, just like a bustier. But for me, I don't want my seam to get to the chest point. That is why I closed the dart. And now I'm just blending my lines, making sure everything is straight. And on that part is where I'll be adding my strap on the chest line. Once everything is done, I would now cut the pattern. So for the front, once I'm done cutting, I'll tip the band pieces together on the front and also tip it together to the back band. So when I am cutting on fabric, that will guide me to cut the width of what I need. And for the back, like I mentioned earlier, I'll be using ×2 of my full back measurement because I'll be adding elastic band to gather the fabric back to my exact measurement. So this will enable me fit in, like, wear the dress without any zipper closure. And I just labeled the pattern so I know which part is the front and which part is the back. Okay. I know some of you will be like, you're wasting too much paper. I know I am wasting too much paper, but I'm doing this for the sake of, there have some beginners here. I would have easily gotten this part from the other pattern and trace the parts out, but I want the whole process to be clear to whoever is watching the video to get all the everything right. That is why I did it this way. Okay, so now I'm just cutting out my pattern, and once I'm done with this process, I'll move over to the dress parts of the dress. Okay, the dress part of the pattern, sorry. Now I'm going to be taping the front band and the back band together. As you can see, they are very small pieces because I don't want to misplace any of these pieces. That is why I just tape them together, and I'm labeling the front to know where the center front is, because the center front will be cut on fold as well on the band. And yeah, this is the band and that is the bra pieces. So I'll be cutting 4 pieces for the bra, 2 for the main for the front and the other 2 to line it up. You need to line it up to get a clean and nice finishing. So as you can see, once I cut on fabric and join the darts, so when placing it on the sewing it on the band, I will be joining the bra piece from the 0.5 inch I took in, and by the time I join both bra piece, I'll be having 1 inch space in between both bra. So now I'm just cutting off the upper part of the main dress pattern, which I don't need anymore. But before I do that, I'm going to draw a line in order to measure what the length of my strap will be. So as you can see, I just drew a line, a straight line down, and I'll take my tape and measure from the chest point, because that is where the bralette is going to end. So that is where the strap will be joined. So I'm just measuring what my length will be, and this is how you get the exact length of your strap. And I'm going to write that down on the pattern so I don't forget what the measurement is. And I'll also cut out the upper part of the front pieces. Like I said, I'll be using from the bust line downward. So once this is done, the next step is to determine my drape point. So for the back, I want the drape to go below my half length, so I measure 3 inches downward from my natural waistline, and I'm just connecting the point, and I'll label it as drape point. That is for the back. For the front, I'm using the under bust line as a reference because I want the drape to fall just below my under bust point, so you can see the band of the bralette. And now I'm just cutting out the side seam, and I'll cut on fabric. So this is the pattern. This is what I'll be using to cut the main dress fabric. As you can see, I have placed the front on fold, and I will be cutting through the under bust line to the tip of the side seam in order to get my drape. And I'll be repeating the same thing on the back pattern. I'll fold my fabric into 2, place my pattern on fold, then slash through the drape point I labeled earlier, and raise it up in order to get some extra fabric which will form the drape. So if you are making a drape top, this is how you go about it. But as we move forward on the video, you'll see how I got my exact drape style. Okay. So please note, the more you raise your pattern, the more you get excess fabric which will form the dart. So for me, I just randomly raised it. I did not take any particular measurement because I know I'm going to check my drape on the mannequin. Okay, so I'm going to add my seam allowance, which is 0.5 inch all around the side seam on both the front and back, and I'll cut out, and the next step will be to start sewing. I'll also cut my bralette pieces. Okay, so I am done cutting all my pieces, and as you can see, I have 4 pieces for this particular pattern. So 2 for the front part and the other 2 to line it up. So what I'm going to do here is to sew my dart. I'm just marking the points where the dart will be ending or starting from. So I'm going to sew all the dart on the 4 pieces, and then sew my strap pieces, and I'll take all the piece to my ironing board, iron them, and you see what they look like.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby. And twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, but I don't wanna jinx it, baby. Let's not get ahead of my time. Oh, but I don't wanna miss you, baby. So I stand up and speak my mind. Oh.
And now after pressing, this is what the pieces look like. So I will be inserting the strap in between the front and back piece of one bralette, of one bra, or I don't know what to call this at this point. So I'll insert the strap in between, place the other one on top, and so please, I need your attention here. So there's a change of plan. Initially I planned to make the bralette detachable from the main dress, but I changed my mind. So please, I want you to only sew the inside part of the bralette. So as you can see, there's a picture on the side with a mark, so I want you to only sew that part for now. And once we are done with the drape and we insert the dress piece to the bra piece, then we can sew the other parts. So for now, just sew only the inside part. You will understand better as we move forward. Okay, so for me, I sewed both parts because I changed my mind after sewing. I later on picked one side, which you'll see later. So this is it. After sewing, I'll top stitch and also top stitch just the inside part for now. And once we insert the dress piece into the side of the bra, we can then close it and do our top stitching on that part. So for now, just top stitch just the inside part. And after top stitching, this is what it look like, looking really clean and of course, you know, nice. We don't joke, our sewing is always on point on this channel. So yeah, this is what it look like after top stitching. And the next step now will be to measure the band. So for the elastic band, I used 14 inches, and I'm just going to place the elastic, and this is the other piece, is the front band piece. As you can see, I have notched the middle point. So I'm just going to place the elastic band in between the back strap piece, and I'll sew with a one-sided foot. So the reason I do it this way is just to sew the exact width or the exact length of the fabric. So when I insert my elastic band in, it will be just this, it will be the length of the elastic band. I hope that makes sense. So as you can see, I'm done sewing. I'll take the elastic band out, then turn the fabric in out to get to the right side before inserting the elastic band through it. And as you can see, the elastic band has gathered the excess fabric together, so I'll be able to wear this without any opening. So now I'm just going to join the back to the front band. So please pay attention and so you see what I'm doing. So I'm going to sew the back to the front band in a way that I still have my 0.5 seam allowance on both sides of the front band. So as you can see how I placed it, I'm going to sew that, and the seam will be inside. Okay. After sewing, this is what it look like. I'll fold the seam allowance in, and I still have the 0.5 seam allowance on both sides of the front band. So this part, like I said, I already did this before I changed my mind. I just want to show you how I cut the padded foam to the shape of the bralette. So once this is done, the next part will be to get our drape of the main dress and insert it into the side of the bralette. Draping, the front and back dress pattern I cut. So I'll be draping on this bra. So as you can see, I opened this part a bit because I want the drape to go in before I sealed this part up. So I'm just gonna drape on it, and yeah. So before I do that, I'm going to also, I've not sewn this part on because of course I need to sew what needs to be in here before I can seal the under. Okay. So I'm just going to pin. You can see I already notched the midpoint. I'm just going to pin this there. So I know this is not straight at the moment, but let's just forget about this part first. I just put this part here. So when I drape on top, you see what I'm doing. So this is the front of the top. As you can see, I already overlocked and I it. So I'll be folding in 2 inches like this. So I'll measure 2 inches and I'll pin the point just to know what I'm doing. I'll do the same on the side. I'll put a pin on the 2 inches part. So this is how it's gonna be folded. Okay. So let's just assume this is where this is gonna be by the time it's sewed. I want the drip to show just a bit of this part. So, mind you, this is how it's gonna fold. This is the 2 inches. So I'll be starting the drip from, let's say, 2 inches from this part. So 2 inches, I'll place a pin here. 2 inches, I have to mark this outside. Here's where the drape will be starting from. So to start with, I'm going to hold this like this and then see how much I want it. So if I pin it like this, as you can see, for the front I feel the drape is too much, so I'm going to hold in more. I'm going to come in more, let's say from this part. Let's try if one is here and one is here. Let's see how the drip. So I think this is kind of okay. I'll just come. So I don't know where that noise came from, but it kept going on and on, so I had to switch back to voiceover. So what I basically did was I moved my hand backward a bit, and now I'm just checking what measuring what I have to take in. So from the tip of the fabric on the side, I'll measure in 4 inches because that's the point I am satisfied with. Okay, so I'll measure in 4 inches, and from the 4 inches point I'll measure down 2 inches. So the 2 inches is what I'll fold in before starting my drape. So I'm just going to place a pin there so I know where I will be folding in. So as you can see, I just fold that in and I'll place it from I'll pin it to the dress form, because once I am done draping, I'll be trimming off the excess fabric on the side. So I'm just going to pin that down, then repeat the same thing on the other side. So from the start, I'll measure in 4 inches, and from the 4 inches point I'll measure down 2 inches. So the 2 inches is what I'll be folding in. Okay, so once I get the point, I will fold it in and make sure the fabric is straight before pinning to the dress form. Okay. So now after pinning, as you can see on both sides of the fabric, I already notched the waist point, so I know where the waist point is. Now I'm going to be pinning the waist point to the waist part on the seam, you know, on the side seam of the dress form. So I'll pin that down on both sides and also pin above the waist point. And with that, I can see the excess fabric on the dress, and I can then pleat the excess fabric upward, okay, to add more volume to the drape. So I'll pin both sides of the waist and also pin the side seam to around the under bust area, and then I'll pleat the excess fabric. So as you can see, I want the shape, the waist to be snatched a bit. So see what I'm doing, pay attention, and it's very self-explanatory.
You give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, 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 oh,
So as you can see, the drape is dripping, and you can arrange this the way you want, and later on I'll give it a good press. So now I'm just going to trim off the excess fabric on the side, and also notch the points where the piece that will go into the side of the bralette, where it will end, and that is where the back it's going to be joined from. So that's the point I just notch. So from the top to that point, we go into the bralette, and from the other part downward will be joined to the back of the dress. So I'll trim the excess on the other side and also notch, and then we can move over to the back.
baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight.
Now one last thing to do before I move forward to the back is to pin the drape I already made, or the pleats I already made, so in order not to lose them. So you can either pin or unstitch. So for me, I am just going to pin for now, and when I take the piece of the dress form, I'm going to sew it down with my sewing machine. So yes, I'm just pinning the other side to make sure everything stays intact, and now it's time to move to the back. So for the back, I'm just going to pin that part. Just pin it anywhere for now. Just take it, move it out of my way, and I'll repeat the same thing, just the same thing I did for the front. The difference is that the back is going to be lower than the front, the drape. So I'm just pinning the waist I already notched to the dress form, so I can then determine how much fabric I need, how much fabric is left to drape. So I just placed a pin on the dress form to determine how low the drape will be for the back. Okay, so I'll do the same thing, from the measure 2 inches downward, fold that in, then pin just to see what I need to do. So as you can see, this is far lower than where the pin is, so I'm going to do the same thing I did for the front. I'll measure in 4 inches and pin that to see if that is okay, and as you can see, it's okay. So it's basically the same thing I did for the front. I measure in 4 inches, then fold in 2 inches, and this is it. So I'm going to pin the rest part of the side seam and then pleat the rest of the fabric just like I did on the front.
Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry.
So now I'm done with all the pinning and draping. I'll trim off the excess fabric on the side and also pin the drapes together. Then I'll take the pieces off the mannequin and move over to my sewing machine to sew them together.
Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby, and twist myself at the spine. Don't wanna overthink it, baby. It's just twist your body and mine. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight hour.
So yes, I'm just going to take it off and we move over to sewing. So I think this is by far the longest video I have uploaded so far. This dress looks very easy and simple, but trust me, it is tricky. And you can see I tried to make this video as short as possible, but if I made it shorter than what it is now, you won't be able to understand the process. So I know everyone wants a short video, but trust me, if you want to learn something, this dress took me hours to make, and you know, having to couple everything in less than an hour video, I think it's not bad. And now it's time to sew. So I'll take the padded foam off to have enough room to turn the piece in out. So first I will first of all sew the pleated piece down so they don't move around, and once I'm done sewing, I will insert the piece into the opening on the bralette. Okay, and I'll make sure I measure from the start to the point I want to sew the piece on. So what I measured earlier was 2 inches. I'll confirm I'll confirm the 2 inches point, then place a pin on the part and I'll sew. Once I'm done sewing, I'll check to make sure my stitches are okay, and once everything is okay, I'll trim off the excess seam allowance on the inside and I'll top stitch and then repeat the same thing on the other bra piece. Remember when I was trimming the excess fabric on the drape part, I notched the point where the sewing will stop. Now I'll get a pin and push that part out so I can sew it neatly, and that is also the point where the front and back will be joined from. Once I'm done sewing, I'll turn the piece to the right side to make sure everything is sewn beautifully, and once I'm satisfied with the look, I'll trim off the excess seam on the inside and I'll repeat the same thing on the other bra piece, and then I'll top stitch. So if you've been following me on this channel, you should be aware of the quality of my sewing. I love my work to speak for me, and for the people asking where I learned how to sew from, if you're watching this video from Lagos, Nigeria, you must have heard of Gmite Fashion Academy. I was the best graduating student in 2020. With that being said, you know you're learning from the best. You will always get the best. So don't forget to click on the subscriber button. Give the video a thumbs up. Let me know in the comment section. Let me know your thoughts and suggestion. Okay, so moving forward, Now it's time to sew the bra piece to the band. So as you can see, I already notched the midpoint, and I'll be placing the piece 0.5 inch away from the center, which is the midpoint. So, and I'll be sewing from in out. So as we go forward, you will see what I mean by in out. And now I'm just going to sew, and once I sew to the end, I'll place the other bra piece and continue sewing. So at this point, I already inserted the padded foam. Okay, so yep.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're channeling wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight.
And this is what I mean by in out. So as you can see, this is the inside, the back part. So it's sewn from the back to the front. So I'll be folding this part in, and the front part will be top stitch done. But before I do that, I'll join the other part of the band to the other side of the side seam. Once I'm done sewing that part, then I'll come back to sew this part down and top stitch on the whole of the front. And I'll take that part slowly because it's the front part and we want it to be very neat. So as you can see, I'm pinning the front down. So once I pin to a point, I will move over to the other side to sew the other back piece to the front before I sew the front.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, well, I don't wanna jinx it, baby.
Now I'll push the seam in and I'll pin that part down, sew it before I top stitch the whole of the front.
Baby, you give me ice and fire. You're giving me wind and rain. You're some kind of butterfly. Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh,
Now I'm sewing the other side of the side seam down, and once I get to the top, I'll leave my needle down and turn the fabric to the position where I can start top stitching. So this is the front. I will take this part as slow as possible, because even though the drape will be even though with the drape on the front, the band of the bralette will still be visible. So I'll try to sew as slow as possible, and once I'm done sewing, I will show you what it look like.
Baby, you give me midnight. You whip up my appetite. Don't leave me here high and dry. Oh, oh, oh,
And this is it after sewing, bearing in mind this hasn't been pressed yet. And also on the side seam, I have joined the front and back side seam to a point. Okay, so now it's time to show you how I will be joining the upper part of the back to the upper part of the front. Okay, so as you can see, this is the pinned part, like the pleat or drape that I made earlier, and this is how I will be attaching the back to the front. So remember, I notched the point, and part of the notch point went into the front bralette, and the back will be sewn to the front like this from the notch point. So this is how it's going to be sewn on both sides. Okay, so now I'll take this to my sewing machine and sew it down, and I'll finish up by overlocking the side seams, and the next and the last step will be to attach the strap to the back piece of the bralette. So remember, I wrote the measurement of the strap to the pattern. Now I'm just taking that measurement, and I'll cut the excess off, and also repeat the same thing on the other strap, and I'll make sure to compare the two straps together, making sure they are of the same length. So this is why it's good to do it this way. You see, although I measured them individually, but there is still a tiny bit of difference, so I'm just going to cut that off, and this is how I'm going to sew it. I opened a bit of seam on the back, and it's sewn. So I'm just finishing by overlocking the edges, the seam, and I'll show you the finished look.